Well, hello everyone. Welcome to my presentation on the Included Summit. I'd like to start firstly by thanking Natalie for inviting me to come and talk on this summit. I've been watching some of the talks this week and have really been enjoying it. So I've come on here today to just chat to you about a few things and to talk to you or to give you my presentation that I've prepared. I'll tell you a little bit about myself first. My name is Patricia Falchetta, and I'm the founder of Social Living Solutions. I reside and live in Canberra, Australia. I know some of you on this summit are in the United States and are in other countries around the world. So I'm very excited to meet you here on Facebook and through the summit. And if you are watching, please do come on, let me know you're watching, and interact with me and ask me questions as I go, because I have got my tabs open so that I can see your questions if you ask them as I go and as I'm presenting this live. So as I was saying to you, I am the founder of Social Living Solutions. I'm a neurodiversity advocate, an international speaker, and an educational facilitator. I am the creator of a program called the Family Joy Model and the Family Joy Program. I'm the leading authority in family joy training, and I have created a holistic program to support families with neurodiverse children to relieve stress, relieve anxiety, and create balance, happiness, and better family joy. As a passionate advocate for neurodiverse people, I help families with neurodiverse children to live a joyful life free of discrimination and judgment. Having gone through many struggles with my children myself, it prompted me to create my business, Social Living Solutions. And I started my business about 6 years ago now, in October 2016. And I wanted to provide parents with understanding and practical support, and to just know that there's someone out there working in this area that just gets it. And I do. I just get it. And there are many reasons for why I just get it, but it is one of the biggest compliments I do get from my clients, and that it comes without any judgment or any personal opinion of you or your circumstances. So I created the program in response to working with neurodiverse families for over 8 years and my own life experience. I have 2 neurodiverse children, and I'm neurodiverse myself. So that is probably why you get no judgment from me, because I have a really confirmed lived experience of being neurodiverse and of neurodiversity and how it can affect our daily lives. So I've navigated a neurodiverse path my entire life and throughout my children's lives. And I well understand the issues that you face daily, and I know what it feels like to feel lost, because I felt lost. And certainly when my children were younger, I felt very lost and without very little support. I've also experienced the stress and the overwhelm and worry from being an autism parent. I've also experienced the same judgmental looks as many of you will have from strangers in shopping centres, and being told your child needs more discipline by complete strangers as well as close family. Having worked with neurodiverse children in the school system, even when the child can integrate into the school, they simply don't get the attention and support that they need to thrive. They are often viewed as the problem that needs to be fixed. Hey Lisa, thanks for watching. They're often viewed as the problem that needs to be fixed rather than as one part to a whole equation. And so together today, I'm just going to examine with you a structure and a plan and a model to support a better life, more balance and more joy. And that's for you as well as for your child or your children if you have several children that are neurodiverse. My vision is that through every aspect of my work, I hope to see fulfillment of my vision for a world where people with autism and other neurodiversity are accepted, integrated, and recognized as valued members of society. My aspiration is to remove prejudices and misconceptions around neurodiversity and replace ignorance with compassionate understanding. I've come on this summit today to encourage you to keep the light shining. Sometimes the world of autism and neurodiversity can be very dark. So I want you to hold on to the hope that there's always light at the end of the tunnel, no matter how long and challenging the tunnel. Sometimes it feels as if you're going to be buried underground forever and that there's no way out. And I can tell you that I certainly have felt like that many times throughout my own life journey, but also with my journey with my children as well. So please treat this presentation today like a smorgasbord. Take out the bits out of it that are applicable to you. Only pick out the bits and pieces that resonate with you, and that's totally fine. That's what I want you to do. Please remember that I'm not discounting the fact that autism can be very challenging to deal with, especially for profoundly autistic people who may be non-verbal and can have extreme difficulties communicating their needs. These individuals I know and have witnessed can become incredibly frustrated trying to communicate, especially if distressed. This frustration can manifest itself in the child biting, kicking, hitting, and or punching their parents, their peers, or their teachers. But children who are verbal as well struggle just as much. And this is a thing that, not a thing, it's an issue that I'm addressing at the moment with the education system, because these children sometimes also do bite, hit, kick, and punch and are verbally or physically aggressive. And that's because, particularly as young children when they're in primary school, they don't yet have the language or the emotional intelligence to know what's happening. They're getting these really, really strong feelings within their bodies, but they don't know what to do with them. And of course, with the right support, they can learn what to do with those feelings and they can learn how to better express them. But sometimes, unfortunately, in the early years, it does come out in this physical way. And as I said, it's because they don't quite yet have the language or the emotional intelligence to be able to articulate what's occurring for them, especially where sensory issues or overload occur. And this is a massive issue, especially in our education system in Australia. I don't know what it's like for those of you that are watching internationally and what happens in your education systems. But I was actually on a national body yesterday here in Australia where we're looking at the action that schools take, which is when children do have those behaviours that I've just been speaking about in class, they'll tend to be either suspended or expelled from school. So they're being punished for their behaviour. Now, what we all need to remember is that behaviour, whether neurodiverse or not from our children, but this, of course, we're talking about neurodiverse kids here, behaviour is a need that has not been met. So what the schools need to do, what the education system needs to do, they need to address that behaviour is a need that's not been met. So they need to find out why that behaviour is occurring. Suspending the child, expelling the child, putting them in detention is not going to solve that problem. All that is going to do is cause them shame. It's going to cause them embarrassment. These kids are already operating under a much higher level of anxiety than their neurotypical peers are. They already feel different. They already feel ostracized. So then when the schools do that to them, they're just enforcing those feelings of feeling ostracized, feeling different, that they need to be punished, that there's something wrong with them. There's nothing wrong with them. They're neurodiverse. They have different brains that are wired differently, and the system or the way society is set up at the moment does not suit these people, and that's what we need to look at. We don't need to look at punishing them and trying to fix them and say that there's something wrong with them and they somehow need to, fit into the world as it is at the moment. We need to look at supporting them. So I've got a quote here that I just want to share with you. To measure the success of our societies, we should examine how well those with different abilities, including persons with autism, are integrated as full and valued members of society. So just think about that quote while I'm talking. So I'm just going to share with you, just so you get to know a little bit more about me, my journey with autism. So let me take you back to 2010. My oldest son was 8 years old, and we just received his autism diagnosis. I remember sitting in the living room with my husband, feeling devastated, helpless, and both of us fearful and worried about his future. These feelings are not uncommon when you first get a diagnosis. Most parents, when they first receive a diagnosis, feel devastated, they feel fear. they feel that their perfect child now is somehow flawed. And this is because there are still so many misconceptions, ignorance, and misinformation around autism and what it is. Fast forward 10 years to now. That beautiful 8-year-old boy is now a gorgeous 18-year-old in year 12, in his final year of high school here in Australia. He's holding down a part-time job, he drives, and he's on a good trajectory. This is not without a lot of support, intervention, and constant monitoring from his parents. However, it does go to show that it's far better than we ever thought when we received that diagnosis 10 years ago. Again, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that the challenges at times feel or felt insurmountable for us. I'm not saying that it's not a tough road. But what I am saying is that it can be surmountable and that there can be light at the end of the tunnel. What I'm wanting you to do is to open your hearts and eyes to the fact that with the right support, the right knowledge, and deep understanding of autism and neurodiversity that individuals can achieve. What I want you to open your eyes and your hearts to is that there's still so much that's not fully understood about autism and other neurodiversity, such as ADHD, and the comorbid conditions that sit with autism and ADHD predominantly. And as some of you will know, autism and ADHD can sit together as well. My oldest son, the one that I was just speaking about, has both autism and ADHD. So now I'm going to speak a little bit about the gifts of autism and neurodiversity. There are many positive attributes or gifts, if you like, that can come with being neurodiverse. Firstly, it's important to note that individuals who are autistic are profoundly empathetic and feel others' pain, stress, and anxiety tenfold of that of their peers. So I ask you to look at your child or autistic family member and see their strengths. Now, just going back to that thing about them feeling the empathy and pain, you know how I was speaking about before in regards to them acting out in class and there being these violent outbursts and that. I've read some very interesting research recently that was saying that sometimes those outbursts and that happen because when another child in their class is feeling distressed or particularly stressed or is hurt or injured themselves, the child who is neurodiverse in that classroom or the children that are neurodiverse in that classroom will feel that child's pain or stress or anxiety, and they will feel it tenfold. Now imagine a little 5 or 6 year old child or even a 10-year-old child picking up those feelings from another human, but not knowing quite what they are, not understanding. They're going to feel overwhelmed. They're going to feel stress, and they're going to go into fight or flight. So that's what happens, and that's when you get that acting out in the classroom. That's also why you get school refusal. That's also why they sometimes need mental health days. So that is what's happening. There, of course, are certain quirks that exist because of their neurodiversity and issues that they struggle with daily, such as their impulse control. But look within your child, look within your neurodiverse family member. Look beyond these annoyances and you'll begin to see their gifts. Something I'd also just like to mention too, because I'm not sure how many of you know, and I mention this because I'm recently working with a young man who's neurodiverse. He has autism and ADHD, and he's been having a lot of meltdowns, and he's been really, really struggling. And I was explaining to him the other day, and this is what I want to explain to you because I don't know how many of you are aware of this, that with neurodiverse people, their amygdala is actually bigger, larger. It's enlarged than neurotypical people or in neurotypical brains. So what the amygdala is it sits at the rear of our brain, the rear of our head. And we've had our amygdala since the beginning of evolution. And the amygdala is the reptilian part of our brain. So what that is that's the center that sends us into fight or flight. Now, for neurodiverse people, ADHD, autism, all neurodiversity, that is enlarged, that is bigger. So we go into fight or flight a lot quicker, and therefore we tend to live under a high level of stress all the time, and our cortisol levels are very high. So an interesting fact or statistic is that the average age for a person who with autism is 54, and that's in Australia. In America, it's actually 36. And the reason why their average age is so low is because they're operating under a much higher level of cortisol or anxiety all the time. So therefore, it's putting constant stress on their body. So even if you look at it from that point of view, if we don't make life easier for these people, if we don't change society, we don't change our opinions, our supports, that is going to keep on happening. Now for Australians, that age of life expectancy is lower than our Indigenous people. So it really, really is quite alarming. Now, going back to the strengths of neurodiverse people, many neurodiverse individuals tend to be very creative, whether that's musical or artistic. Some people on the autistic spectrum possess the ability to think outside the box when looking at engineering or architectural challenges. They're loyal, faithful employees. They'll never take a day off unless they actually are truly sick, and they'll follow rules and regulations to the letter, and they'll never waver with these. So they're actually really, really good employees. They're fantastic employees to have, and their attention to detail is second to none, and they will pick up on errors and issues that nobody else will pick on. So again, we need to change our perception of autism and neurodiversity to thinking how we as a society and as individuals can help our autistic neurodiverse brothers and sisters to thrive to be the best that they can be. So to do this, what do we do when we first get a diagnosis? What services are there, and what should we access first? Going back to when my son was diagnosed, this was the other challenge that felt insurmountable. This is still a common problem, particularly here in Australia. When parents first receive a diagnosis, they're left feeling confused, frustrated, worried, and scared. They're often not informed of the ins and outs of the diagnosis. They're not given any information about different approaches, what services they can access, or what support there is. It's as if they now have to tackle this new challenge blind. So you have an autism diagnosis, now what? So I appreciate in all countries it will be different, as knowledge and support around autism and other neurodiversity it differs so much from country to country. What I would first and foremost say to you is that the earlier you can bring in supports for your child, the better. Please don't beat yourself up if your child's older and you've only just got a diagnosis. My younger son wasn't diagnosed until he was 14. So this happens more than you would realize, and this can be due to several factors. Firstly and most importantly, when you get that diagnosis, don't feel like a failure or as if your child is somehow flawed. This is critical, as your child will pick up on this. And with neurodiversity, there's such a slippery slope towards poor self-esteem and anxiety and depression and sometimes suicide. So the issue here that I acknowledge is that, and what I'm speaking about too, and this is another part of the issue, is that when you do get that diagnosis, the diagnosis process is heavily deficits based. The diagnosis process only looks at what your child cannot do, what milestones they haven't met, where they're suffering, whether it be emotionally, physically, socially, what their deficits are. Therefore, you're pushed into focusing on your child's deficits. You're pushed into focusing what they haven't met yet, what societal standards they're not meeting, rather than focusing on what they can do and their strengths. So once a diagnosis has been received, I would highly recommend to parents that you start seeking out the best support, people and professionals for your family and child. The thing to remember about autism and ADHD is that it will not just affect your child just because of the many challenges that come with being neurodiverse. It will affect your whole family, because the siblings have to live with it, deal with it, and you as parents have to live with it and deal with it. And so you really, really need to understand the neurodiversity. So do what you can to inform yourself of neurodiversity. Of course, this is the other thing. Unfortunately, every neurodiverse person is different. There's a saying, if you know one person with autism, you know one person with autism. So you need to really, really work at understanding your child and how to support them better, and also be really careful of the language that you use around them. Sometimes the best support people might come from outside your family. You may find members of your extended family struggle with the diagnosis with the word autistic or ADHD. They somehow will feel that in some ways it's a malignment of them. This is particularly apparent in certain cultures. So in this, I hope that you will embrace the awesomeness of autism and learn how to turn disability into disability. An autism diagnosis doesn't mean the end of the world. It can mean a different journey or a different experience. And that is what often happens too when you do receive that diagnosis, is that we professionals in this area talk about this often, that when you get that autism diagnosis for your child, a lot of parents go through a grief period or just despair period, and they go through the grief of thinking what they thought was going to be their child's trajectory or their child's life might be slightly different. So there is a grieving process there. So that does need to be acknowledged. But what I'm talking to you and what I'm trying to say to you today is that there shouldn't be a grieving process, that we need to educate so that we understand that this is neurodiversity, different thinking brains that bring so many strengths, so many positives to this world, so that we actually celebrate when we get that diagnosis that our child is neurodiverse, and we don't, feel this despair and this stress. So as I was saying before, it means a different journey, a different experience from what you pictured. It means too that you now have a reason for all the perplexing things you've noticed about your child. And so as you now have an answer, let's move forward with this and embrace the positives and support the positives and strengths of your child. As I was saying before, the whole diagnostic process is deficits-based. It can leave you feeling drained in the sense that you feel that your child's somehow lacking, rather than focusing on all their positive qualities and what they add to the world. I'd like to add a particularly controversial thought here. Why do we even need a diagnosis? Why can't there be acceptance throughout society that there are just different brains that are neurodiverse and brains that are neurotypical? If we simply had a much needed overhaul of our whole education system to suit both neurotypicals and neurodiverse, and teachers had proper training and were properly supported and understanding of neurodiversity, then we would be able to get rid of the need to put children through a very stressful diagnostic process, causing them to feel lesser than. It's simple when you think about it. We have thank you, Lisa. We have sensory smart classrooms and breakout and sensory rooms. They're just standard in all schools. So we know what sensory smart classrooms are. We know that neurodiverse people, that fluorescent lights can either, if they have auditory issues, they can hear the fluorescent lights. Sometimes it's the brightness of them. So we don't have fluorescent lights. We have furniture that's suitable. We are aware of the noise levels, and we have breakout sensory rooms for our neurodiverse children, so that we have sensory smart trained teachers. So teachers' training and education does need to change. And please, anyone that's a teacher watching this is not a criticism of teachers. This is talking about how we can better support everyone, including the teachers who support these children. We change the language we use in classrooms. We get rid of these ridiculous ideas of punishment, suspension, and expulsion. And we actually treat children like they are people and not something to be controlled, chastised, or shamed. And that's for all children. That's not just for neurodiverse children. And then we progress towards sensory smart learning spaces at universities and other future education institutions. And we do the same in our workplaces. The world will then become a completely different place where our neurodiverse brothers and sisters can move about without fear of misunderstanding or judgment. This is a quote from a lady, Elaine Hall. Autism offers a chance for us to glimpse an all-filled vision of the world that might otherwise pass us by. I love this quote. Autism is a superpower. Neurodiversity is a superpower. It's the reason we have many great actors, musicians, electric cars, Microsoft, and Virgin Airways. All these people are neurodiverse. for your child to embrace their neurodiverse diagnosis and to whether that's autism, ADHD, or any other neurodiverse diagnosis, and feel at one with it, you as the parent must embrace it. As mentioned previously when I was speaking before, as I was saying, whole diagnostic process the whole diagnostic process of an individual has to endure to have a that the whole diagnostic process is so heavily deficit based. So this can only be detrimental to one's self-esteem, and as they very quickly come to realize that they've somehow all of their deficits have been looked at, and because they may have passed that the diagnosis test, if you like, with flying colors. So what is this going to do to the child's self-esteem and sense of self-worth, I ask you? If you think about it, it would reinforce the feelings of difference, not fitting in, and the stereotypes that they already would be aware of. I continuously tell my young clients that I work with that being neurodiverse is a superpower. And I truly do believe this. I just need them and want them to. I really, really want my clients to believe this. Some of them do, and some of them really do embrace their autism because my approach is so heavily strength-based. People who are neurodiverse may struggle with communication. They might feel awkward when relating to others. But their strengths can be that they're very creative, they're very musical, they're very empathetic, they're great employees, they have great attention to detail, they're fiercely loyal, fantastic friends, will come up with amazing suggestions in the workplace and in the classroom if they feel confident too, and they're well supported by their peers and their teachers. And quite often, because of the way the system is set up, they often might not realize these qualities or realize these strengths until they're much older. And sometimes, sadly, some of them never do. When they're younger, they will not understand why they're having such overwhelming feelings, and they may act out at school, as I was talking about, with violence or verbal abuse, as they don't understand that what's going on for them and what they're feeling. So my thoughts are that people with autism and ADHD don't have a disorder, that they don't have a disability. And I'd like to explore this with you and look at how you can better support your children to use this concept and approach. So again, it's, I was talking about that superpower approach. People with both ASD and ADHD experience the world in a much more heightened or sensitive way than others do. So if you like, the world is much more full on for them, and every person with ASD will experience sensory stimuli in the environment differently. So what I'm saying to you, what I'm proposing, the way that I'm wanting you to think is to really, really think with the language you use with your children, the language you use in your household, even with teachers and other professionals that are working with your kids, to use strength-based language to support them, get them focus on their strengths, get them to realize, get them to know what they're good at, and and to really, really encourage those special interests. The special interests are, of course, are a comfort for them, but they also are something that quite often can be used and brought into their career or what they might do with their future. I also work with neurodiverse people who are a little bit older and helping them to find jobs and employment. And this is the other thing too. I've been saying that neurodiverse people possess the ability to think outside the box, but we need to think outside the box too, to look at how to utilize their strengths in workplaces and how to utilize their strengths in society. And this is the thing too, is thinking about it as it's not a disability, that it is an ability, but it's an ability that gives them different abilities to what our norm is, to what we see as our norm. And this is, again, I come back to the education system because I'm just doing so much work in this space, in this area at the moment, working with educators, working with national bodies to try and change the way that our schooling system is and the way that neurodiverse children are treated, because they are just treated so poorly in our education system. And to get away with this, this idea, as I was saying before, of expulsion or suspension. No child, whether they're neurodiverse or not, should be suspended or expelled. Every child needs to be looked at, that what's going on. Why is this behavior occurring? This behavior is occurring because there's a need that's not being met. Whether the need isn't being met at school or in the family home, it is what we need to be looking at and working towards. So that's the end of my presentation. Please, if you watch this afterwards, please put #replay in the comments. I will put my contact details in the comments. As I said, I live in Canberra, Australia, and I am a very passionate advocate for neurodiversity, as you can see, particularly for our young children and also for families, and to support parents to help support their neurodiverse children to be the best that their children can be, and to realise their full potential. So thank you for watching, all of you that have watched and that are on. Thank you, Lisa, for watching, and have a fantastic day. I hope there's many, for those of you that have been on the summit this week, there are so many other good talks in here. There's ones from, Carly Marie and Sammy Ann, who I work very close with, and also some other fantastic international presenters as well. So thank you for coming on today, the time will be very different wherever else you are in the world. Thank you. Bye-bye.